Hello, I wanted to share with you today our new experimental features for governance security policies. My name is Grant Hickman. I'm a senior product manager here at GitLab, working with our security policies and compliance teams. And I'm excited to talk about security policy scopes and our pipeline execution action for scan execution policies. So before we get into that, I wanted to give a little bit of background into what exactly we're talking about when we talk about security and compliance policies, and to also kind of frame up the difference between what we're doing in the security policies team and the compliance team. So first of all, I would look at security and compliance policies as technical controls that enable our security and compliance professionals to prevent or reduce risk in their organization. So with our compliance features, we have compliance frameworks, standards adherence reports, violations reports, and audit events. And these features all help us to give insight into and data into our compliance posture for our compliance teams to help them understand if particular settings are not properly configured, and help them understand where to take action. So this is all about surfacing up data, creating reports, and being able to provide this type of evidence to internal or external auditors within your organization. GitLab's policies work hand in hand with compliance features in that they help to define rules that prevent these violations from occurring in the first place. So these are technical controls for security and for compliance. So yeah, while one of these reports on the current state of our compliance policies instantiate these controls, lock down settings, and ensure that particular behaviors are followed and that we block any malicious patterns. So as an example or metaphor, you might think of our laws around traffic control. So we might have stop signs that are intended to manage the flow of traffic, prevent accidents, and so forth. So when it comes to the policy, we want to ensure that traffic, that cars do not pass through a red light, for example. So compliance reporting, you might think of as the traffic camera. So that helps us to observe and detect if anyone is out of compliance with that law. However, on the other hand, we have policy enforcement. That's how do we ensure that this behavior doesn't continue to happen and that we block it in the first place. So that's where we might have traffic officers that enforce that rule, and there are penalties if you do not comply. So comparing that to our features in security policies, we have two types of policies today. The first is merge request approval policies, which you might have also heard of as scan result policies. We've recently updated the naming around this policy type to better accommodate all of the capabilities that we now have within this policy type. With merge request approval policies, you can enforce project settings to ensure that compliance requirements are met, and you can enforce approvals and merge requests based on findings that are coming out of security analyzers. So if we detect critical findings from secret detection, the rule in this policy type could block the merge request for any critical findings. The second policy type is scan execution policies. This policy type helps you to enforce security analyzers, custom scripts, reports, third-party scanners, or other custom jobs to execute in project pipelines. And we'll be talking about this newly added experimental feature for pipeline execution that will help us to support more broadly custom CI enforcement. But to kind of get a sense of where we're going with security and compliance policies in GitLab, we will continue to expand the scope here and the capabilities that we offer to introduce additional controls to help you lock down and secure your GitLab instance. So this might extend into things like vulnerability management policies, such as policies to help auto-dismiss and auto-resolve vulnerabilities to improve vulnerability management workflows. This could include compliance settings enforcement, policies that more broadly override existing policies across GitLab project settings. There could be deployment approval policies, enforcing workflows around the deployment process. We might also explore things like pipeline abuse or insider threat policies. So anything that essentially in GitLab that we can do to better support security and compliance professionals so that we can ensure our customers are compliant with regulations and standards that they must comply with and adhere to. Being able to set controls through security and compliance policies will help to address those use cases and make it much easier to use GitLab and adopt it from an ultimate tier standpoint. So I did want to also share a few examples just to relate what we're doing to some of the tools and products that we use outside of GitLab. So one example here is a set of features in a Windows operating system for managing security policies. And these are rules that can be set that they don't conflict with the settings that you have in your Windows operating system. Rather, they give administrators tools to enforce a particular behavior or to ensure that the use of the Windows operating system is secure, perhaps for an organization who's rolling out use of Windows across their company. So an example security policy you might see in a Windows operating system is a password reset policy, ensuring that every 70 days, 90 days, for example, the passwords are reset, or you might lock and enforce some type of MFA behavior. So there are policies in the Windows operating system that span across many different categories, and they are additive and help to build on top of those capabilities so that the right type of persona can create controls and ensure security and potentially compliance in use of this system. So another example we've probably seen here internally is use of endpoint security type tools like this data MDM management of our laptops. So profiles are created that are enforced against all of our endpoint machines, all of our laptops, and they have certain rules ensuring that administrators and security teams are able to meet compliance and ensure security across the company. So with that, let's take a deeper dive into these new external features that we've added for security policies. And I'll start with showing you how to enable the features. So what you might do is create a new SaaS test repo, or if you have a self-managed instance, you could create a new group or subgroup, and then you can go and manage this from the group level. So let's first go at the top level here. Let's go to General, Permissions, and Group Features, and then scroll down to find the Security Policy Management section. So what you'll do is essentially enable each of these settings for the pipeline execution action and the policy scope. And then you can also choose to enforce this for all subgroups or not, and just go into the subgroup level to enable this. And so yeah, using this approach, we don't have to also enable, disable flags. This can be configured at the group level, and to be able to more granularly test this experiment out before trying to roll it out within an organization or within a group. All right, so yeah, next let's take a look at the structure that I have here for my demo. What I'm using is a subgroup for this test. I just didn't want to affect some of the other subgroups and demos that I had set up. And let's imagine that here we have an organization called Omega Capital. And for my security and compliance team at Omega Capital, I want to enforce policies and ensure compliance across each of my business units. I have two business units here, Omega Insurance and Omega Personal Banking. And within those two business units, we have a mobile app and a web app. For our compliance, we want to ensure that all of our requirements are met for especially the web apps, they have, let's say, more critical compliance requirements. So I have set a compliance framework label for compliance critical on those particular projects. And our mobile app is a fledgling app. We're still building on it, and we don't have as many compliance requirements at this time to meet. So I've set compliance high as that compliance framework label for each of those projects. Awesome. So with the introduction of the security policy scope feature, we now are able to really granularly manage policies at the top level group or within our subgroups. So I want to kind of showcase that. When you are in a top level group or subgroup, you can go into the secure tab and to policies, and you'll get this clean UI view to manage your policies from this policy editor view. You'll be able to drill down to select which type of policy you want to create. So merge request approval policy or scan execution policy type. And then when a policy is created, I'll use one of my existing policies. You'll see that to make a change, I'll be configuring this with a merge request. And that's going to take me into the security policy project, which is where the policy YAML is stored. And so this allows us to have a full Git history of any changes made to my policies. And I can also enforce particular requirements on this project itself, ensuring that no changes are made that impact my organization or the compliance posture that I have. Great. So with that, let's take a look first at security policy scopes. And what I'm going to do is I'll create or showcase this policy here. This is our merge request approval policy for both projects containing critical and high labels. So you'll now see, once the experiment is enabled, this new section to enforce the policy scope. You can choose to enforce this against projects with a particular compliance framework label applied or multiple labels. Alternatively, if that does not work for you, you can choose to scope it to all projects in the group or select specific projects more granularly. So there's a lot of flexibility there. But I think the ideal path here is to be able to manage your policies based on your compliance framework labels. So what I've done, again, I've applied this to both critical and high labels. And what I'd like to do is ensure that for any of the projects containing that label, that approvals are required for every merge request that's open, targeting all default branches. So any default branch in any project, when you open an MR, approval will be required. I've kept this one simple, starting with one approval. This could be from a user that has a developer, maintainer, or owner permission, but you could also specify individual users specifically, or define a group and put users in that group that would be eligible approvers for these MRs. So I'm going to keep it to one so it's easier to demo. And then I can also, within this merge request approval policy type, override particular settings for MRs in scope of this policy. So MRs targeting default branch, for those, I will be able to override branch modification in that project. I can prevent users from pushing or force pushing changes. So this would ensure that all changes go through a merge request and require review and approvals. And then I could override certain behaviors at the MR level to prevent a merge request author from also being able to approve the MR or any users who have committed to that merge request. And lastly, there are a few settings here. You can also remove approvals if a new commit is added. So we'd strip away the approvals and you'd have to get those back again. Or you could also require users' password to approve. So you could override that setting for those MRs in the given projects. So yeah, in this case, I chose these two settings so it's a little bit easier to demo in this case without having to create some additional users to approve. And I have this already merged, so I'm just going to go into a demo project. So let's take a look at the mobile app. And let's say that as a developer, I want to make a change to this README file. I'll move my controls here. Okay. All right, so now that I've created the merge request, we'll see that pipeline is running, and for the policy that is created called merge request approvals, an approval is required, one approval is required per the policy. And so that is the case for any projects, again, containing that label. Anything that does not have a critical or high compliance label, would not have this additional enforcement. Great. So the other thing I wanted to showcase then is our pipeline execution policy action. So I've created two examples here. Let's just focus on this one for now, which is our critical compliance pipeline execution action. As you go into create a scan execution policy, you can go in and add two different actions. You can run a scan or run CI/CD code. And to run this pipeline execution action for CI/CD code, you can also choose to link to an existing CI file, so you can manage your CI configuration remotely. But for the purposes of this demo, I was wanting to focus on the CI/CD code block that I had generated here. So in this code block, I have two different jobs. The first is creating an echo script that runs in the test stage, and this will run in the branch pipeline. This one has more specific rules, so I've created an additional job running in the test stage that will only run on pipelines with the source merge request event. So with this code block approach with the pipeline execution action, you can define any of the specific CI jobs that you would like to execute, and you can much more granularly manage the rules, ensuring that, say, security scanners run in the pipelines that are appropriate. All right, so I've enabled that already. So let's jump actually back into the project containing, the compliance critical label. Okay, so yeah, let's go into the repository and we'll make a change. Okay, so now we've got the merge request pipeline running. And I'll jump into the pipelines tab here just to showcase that we have now both a branch pipeline running and a merge request pipeline. And so in this case, we have the Echo Compliance MR pipeline job running. And on the branch pipeline, we have the branch pipeline job. And if we look into the job here, we'll see the Echo script that we had configured. Cool. So yeah, that's an option here if you want to granularly configure your CI jobs, enforcing them across multiple projects with some somewhat complex rules, ensuring certain jobs run in a merge request pipeline and that others run in branch pipeline. Or if you want to add more custom logic, you can enable that through the pipeline execution action. Awesome. So while you're trying this out, these new experimental features, I want to make note that these are experimental. They may be unstable as we make some changes and add support for additional use cases. So keep that in mind. If something is broken, we may be working on it actively. Security policy scopes, I would also note they are not yet available for any policies managed at the project level. So this is a pattern that has been used to link policy projects across an organization, across many different groups. And now with security policy scopes, it will be a lot easier to manage from the top level group or a subgroup level. But if you have policies existing on the project level, you won't see the scope feature appear currently. So we are working on adding support if you do have multiple security policy projects linked up to a particular security policy. If you have multiple projects linked to the security policy project, you will soon see that, but it's not available just yet. And if you have feedback, please do feel free to jump into this feedback issue and share your thoughts. And you can also track this epic where we're working on the experiment and working to bring it to GA. And you can also feel free to jump in and take a look at this table for the requirements matrix, where we are exploring different CI behaviors and making sure that everything is accounted for. So if you see something that we're missing, please do let us know. And then lastly, I wanted to address the question of what's happening with compliance pipelines. This is a very critical feature a lot of our customers are using, and we want to make clear that compliance pipelines are not simply going away. They are, as we work on this feature for the pipeline execution policy action, once we have this feature GA, and once we are able to reliably support all the primary use cases for compliance pipelines, we will move compliance pipelines into maintenance mode. But essentially, the capabilities, the feature set, they're all going to continue through security policies. Compliance pipelines will not be removed in 17.0, but they may be removed when we have critical mass in adoption and migration to security policies into this pipeline execution action. And we will be continuing to expand the scope and capabilities. We use the term or the name security policies, but ultimately these are intended for security and compliance controls and are focused on our security and compliance personas. So as we discussed earlier in the presentation here, this is something that we want to continue to expand support for and serve both security and compliance use cases. Cool. So thanks for taking the time to walk through this with me, and I look forward to hearing your feedback in our feedback issue.